luncheon learning about the nation's New Mexico water rights today. There's a lot of activity happening on the New Mexico side. We have a number of basins and subbasins that the nation has water rights in New Mexico. And of course, we have one of our primary settlements completed in the state of New Mexico with respect to the San Juan River Basin and relating to the Navajo Gallup water supply pipeline that also includes the Cutter lateral projects. So we're going to learn a lot more about that today. We had recent legislation introduced in Congress to amend the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project Act in order to fully fund those projects. So very, very happy about that. And then we have 2 pending settlements in the state of New Mexico in addition to that. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to our team to explain more about that. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And don't forget that next week, we have another presentation relating to the nation's water rights, but focused on Arizona, where we are intensely engaged in negotiations with the state of Arizona, the federal government, and other interested parties with respect to the Colorado River and the Little Colorado River. But I'm going to hand things over to MacArthur Stant, and just briefly though, for those of you who don't know me, she ethel branchian she beef between nakai bashis chin sitna jenny dasha che aro nakai dashanella and East Canyon Diablo de Nasha. So this photo is actually near where I live and where I'm from. And then additionally, she Deneba Washington bit agadit ait so shinanish. So I'm the nation's 13th Attorney General. Very happy to be here in this role again. Previously served as the nation's 11th Attorney General. And we actually had Arizona water negotiations during that time as well. So it's really great to bring the institutional knowledge and experience I have from that to today's negotiations. But I'm going to hand things over to our star presenter, MacArthur Stant from our Water Rights Unit. Mac, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Attorney General. It's an honor once again to be here. My name is, just for today, I try to make it a little fun. I'm very honored that I am Dene and I'm a member of the nation, and my father is also Hawaiian. So the reason I tell you this is Hawaiians can have some very fun names. For the first time, I'm going to share my entire full name with you today, and it's MacArthur Lanakila Stant II. I'm named after my father, and it's an honor to be with you. My clan is Senjikin, and I am born for the Hawaiian people. And today, we continue to understand as a nation, and I'm happy to be here to help the members realize what the water rights of our nation are. And I'm going to be saying this often. The way we need to understand this is that it is interaction with all the sovereigns of this country. And if you've been joining us this month, you've heard me say that several times, and it needs to be said, it needs to be remembered that the Navajo Nation as a sovereign, and then we have the federal government as a sovereign and the states. And today we'll be talking about the state of New Mexico and our interactions with the Navajo Nation's interactions with the state of New Mexico, and how the federal government continues to be a part of these water rights for the nation. And that's how this works. This is Indian Water Law 101. And just to keep on reminding you, to keep on helping you understand that. And that there will be times where I'll try to specifically say these are ideas that are connected with the federal government. Now, remember, the federal government, we have reserved water rights, and those are very interesting. And there'll be times today where we have slides with information that I think will connect you with what those specifically mean. But at the same time, because of certain legislation from the federal government, like the McCarran Act, state governments are also involved. And this week we're talking about New Mexico. Again, the Navajo Nation with interactions and relationships with the federal government and the state government of New Mexico in terms of getting water to our people and our chapters in the state of New Mexico. It's fascinating. And I'm grateful for the comments that people have given about wanting to know the details, and we'll do our best to try and do that. Today, throughout the presentation, also we'll be joined by Assistant Attorney General Michelle Brown, who will be able to help us with, I guess I'm going to say this proudly, the more legal terms. So I'm going to be more of like just the basics, and she will have some amazing insights as to the specifics and logistics, because she has worked with these for quite some time now and is very comfortable with them. So there is our Assistant Attorney General, Michelle Brown, and it's great to be with you, both of us. So we're going to put up our slide and start to go over this. We actually want the other portion first. Sorry that we got a little mix up here, but like magic, right? I love it. It's like magic. It's right there. So,
and real quick, Mac, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. She'e Michelle Brown, Natnil Jean Dana Shah, Tachitin Shle, Anaslana Bashichin, Sinajani Dashiche, Anaslana Dashanella. On my father's side, I'm Oglala and Salish and Kootenai, and I'm really happy to be here again today as part of this Lunch and Learn. Okay, Mac, take it away.
Thanks again. All right. So what we're going to go over today, as the AG has already mentioned, the Attorney General hasn't mentioned, is the concept that in New Mexico, the Navajo Nation has multiple settlements, multiple areas. And that's because we have the word up there that is basin, right? The word basin. And we know that in terms of politics, we have state lines. Well, I'm sure all of us know that water doesn't really follow that, right? Not all the time. But an important part is the areas of land that have access to a river or to its tributaries or its streams. The water that's connected together, we refer to as water basins. And in the state of New Mexico, there are several water basins that the Navajo Nation is connected with. And on this slide, we show you that idea. We show you that the San Juan River, and then we also have the Rio San Jose, as well as the Rio Perco basins. And then lastly, there's the Zuni River Basin. So there's a very critical idea about basins, and that's where the settlements must be connected to those river groups, that river family. I like the word family, so I'm going to use a basin is a water family, and there are certain areas that are connected. I'm going to see if the Assistant Attorney General has anything to say about this. If not, we'll move on.
Well, thanks, Mac. So in New Mexico, we actually have one water rights settlement, and that's the Navajo Nation San Juan River Basin up in northern Navajo Nation. And part of that settlement is we have the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project, which is paramount to that settlement. And we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss some proposed amendments that we have related to the project. And then we actually are working on 2 additional settlements. And that would be one that's that's within the Rio San Jose and partial part of the Rio Perco Basin. And then another settlement that we're working on is in the Zuni River Basin. And then we're going to talk about other activities that are occurring related to water rights in New Mexico. So we can go on to the next slide.
And again, this is just, as it says, an overview of all the settlements that we've talked about so far and the activities involved with these. Again, the important idea here, and I'm going to move on to the next slide as well, is this concept of a settlement. And you'll hear us describe parts of a settlement because of its advantages that it has for the nation and for us acquiring our Navajo Nation water rights in regards to settlements compared to other things like litigation. But we'll talk about that more often. Here in this slide, you can see that there is an outline of the basin. And as I mentioned, our lives as members of this nation are very interesting in a wonderful way, in the fact that the boundaries, and we have states there, we see New Mexico, but the concept of that, water water has its own life force, and we actually say that water is life, and water displays that. But so this is the area of the San Juan River Basin. And I'm just going to go moving on, because this is just to help give an idea. Oh,
I do want to point out that you'll see in the map on the left side that the map of the Navajo Nation, we extend in this map into Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. And the basin, the San Juan River Basin, is in northern New Mexico, northwestern New Mexico. But you'll see in that map, there's a line that goes that is kind of divides up that basin, and you'll see that we're also in the upper basin and in the lower basin. Go ahead. Next slide.
Next slide. Oh.
So as part of the settlement, and this settlement was entered into back in 2009, and it was approved by Congress. This is the summary of the water rights that the Navajo Nation negotiated during that settlement. And you'll see that we have a right to diversion of 633,532 acre feet and a right of depletion of 336,979 acre feet a year. This is really actually a good settlement. In as you all know, the climate has changed today, and if we were to negotiate this today, these numbers would look very, very different. And that's something that we're dealing with in other parts of the Navajo Nation in regards to settlement. But this is the detail of the Navajo Nation's New Mexico water rights settlement.
So I'm going to move on then.
Okay.
Because I think that was very well said. Oh.
So I mentioned earlier that what's paramount to our settlement is it was actually called or it's actually referred to as a project-based settlement. Currently, the U.S. is focused on fund-based settlements, and one of the reasons is probably from their experience with our settlement and other Indian tribal settlements. But this settlement in New Mexico, the paramount part of the settlement, the major important priority in the settlement was to have the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project funded. And this project was authorized under PL 11111, and it was authorized at $870 million, and it was to build a pipeline from the San Juan River to reach all the way down to Gallup, and also on other parts of the Navajo Nation that are south of the San Juan Basin, and also to the east, to the west, even a small portion into the Window Rock area. So you all may see the construction that's been occurring. Let me go ahead and turn it over to Mac. You can talk more about that, because I know you did a tour recently.
So I'll make this as pretty brief, but as Michelle said, a lot of you have noticed in driving around the nation now, the pipelines, that are connecting the nation, and they're exciting and they're wonderful. And this comes from this sort of thing of a settlement, right? The settlement is where the Navajo Nation as a party, working with the state and with the federal government, can request funds, and those funds go into projects, a project like this. And as we see it in connecting so much of the nation to its water sources is an amazing thing. I hope this is appropriate for me to say at this time, but we have a lot of information today. And if you feel like we're going quickly, it's not because that we're not sensitive to the fact that it's good to take time and to breathe with the information and to understand it as best we can. But the concept is very soon we plan with the assistance and the partnership of the Water Rights Commission of the Navajo Nation, the Water Rights Unit, will go out and do public meetings, and in those meetings we'll be able to again give you information and answer your questions and talk to you about this, because we, led by our Attorney General Ethel Branch, really want the nation and the members to feel as if this is important information for everyone of the nation. But again, the concept is this is an example of a project, and I'll move over to the next slide. And
can you actually go back to the last slide? I just want to make one point. I apologize.
Okay.
So
oh, yeah, please do.
The right map, you'll see I guess the status of the pipeline, and you'll see that you'll see the green pipeline here. That's called the Cutter Lateral. That pipeline is actually operational now, and it is delivering water to the communities along that pipeline. And then you'll see the brown, or I'm sorry, the blue and the yellow, and those are currently being constructed, and those are the pipes that you can see along the roadway in some areas. They are being installed and will be delivering water as well as part of the settlement. Okay, go on, Mac.
Next slide.
I think we covered this.
Yes, we have. So, but just this again, the concept of that there's a lot of information, and we do hope that we can provide as much of it as possible. So,
could you go back to the last slide?
Yes.
So you'll see that when this settlement was entered into and the project was developed, the idea was that eventually, like in 2040, that the project would serve approximately 250,000 people in the Navajo Nation and New Mexico areas. Now go on to the next slide. The Navajo Nation and our partners did utilize these facts in order to move forward with our settlement. And also, it still is, these issues still are issues that we deal with on the Navajo Nation, that approximately more than 30% of Navajo households do not have running water and rely on water hauling. And we deal with a lot of poor water quality in a lot of these areas. And this is something we're going to talk about when we talk about the settlements that we're currently working on. We can go on to the next slide.
Okay, just one quick thing. Again, vocabulary for those who are learning about water law, which is wonderful. On the very first bullet, you see the word groundwater. And I just want to clarify at times this sort of information. Groundwater, you can kind of think of the water that's what we call an aquifer, or water that's under the ground, right? So we have the ground here and the water that's underneath. And there is a lot of that in the nation. And a lot of you know this, so that's considered to be groundwater. While the water that's on top, we will call surface water. So the rivers and the streams, from those are considered surface water, and both are important in terms of the water that we want for our nation. So I just want to bring up a few of those vocabulary every once in a while to help us all feel more comfortable. Moving on to the next slide.
So currently the project, as I said earlier, back in 2009, the project was funded at $870 million. Well, with all of the impacts that we've been recently experiencing, such as the COVID pandemic, the increase of the cost to construct, the Bureau of Reclamation determined that the project is currently underfunded. And so as a result, that in order to complete the project, the Navajo Nation is introduced amendments and requested that our congressional delegation introduce these amendments into Congress to request more funding and to request other issues that we've seen arise while the project was being constructed, so that we can get authorization to address those issues and to also uh, uh, meet the funding needs. And so the amendments, again, requested by the nation, are to increase funding and to also extend the deadline in order to complete the project, and then also address some other issues, including assist in funding the operation and maintenance cost in order to the operations and maintenance costs are very important, because that will help, if we get assistance, that'll help lower the rates to the customers for the water that will be delivered. And I think that's all I have for that slide, Mac.
Assistant Attorney General has done a great job, because it moves on to this in that she's already talked about it. But I'm also going to just say a reminder that this is a whole process of settlement. And the settlement began with the nation as a party discussing with the federal and the state of New Mexico. And then after that was done, after the settlement was done, we had to have on the federal side it to go to Congress and be congressionally approved, which was already mentioned by Michelle. And then now, after we have all of this compared done, this is the implementation part. This is the implementation where the projects start to physically be put on to the nation, and we see this water amount. But I think I'm just going to, after that little talk that I gave, I'm just going to go on to the next slide. What do you think?
Yeah, but I would like to go ahead and go to the next slide. So the amendments that I just described were introduced by Senator Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, and co-sponsored by Senator Martin Heinrich, also of New Mexico. The Senate bill is Senate Bill 1898. And recently it was co-sponsored by Senator Mitt Romney. So now the bill that was introduced to complete the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project is now considered a bipartisan bill, now that Mitt Romney has signed on as a co-sponsor. So we can go ahead and move on.
So by bipartisan, it simply means that members from both parties are supporting it, and that's a wonderful thing to have that balance. And then we're going to be leaving now the San Juan portion of our presentation and moving on to the next part. But again, this is the San Juan settlement, and a very important part of it was the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project, which as we know now is being implemented and is being supported by the federal government and the state government of Mexico. So moving on to the next part. So it's referred to as the Kerr-McGee settlement, and it focuses on the Rio San Jose Basin. So if you want to, I think this is a really good explanation of what has happened up to this point for this particular settlement. What I want to focus your eyes on real quickly is that last part where it says these reserved rights. Okay, again, that's on the federal side, right? The federal side has, through our treaties, federally reserved rights. What I want us to understand is sometimes we are a little nervous, and I get it. It's been hard, our relationship with the federal government. It's been hard from the beginning, and it continues to be hard. We understand this. But in terms of these federally reserved water rights, they are not subject to abandonment, forfeiture, or loss of non-use. Now, that's really important, because that means even though we might not be fully engaged with our water use at this time, it doesn't matter. They're still our rights. They're still ours, which is a little different. Well, actually, it's very different than from the state view. In the state view, water rights can be abandoned, and you can lose them if you don't use them. It rhymes, and I don't really. Anyway, so if you don't use them, you lose them. But that's not true for our Federal Reserve water rights. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that we don't lose them. And that can be, again, I want us to understand this because it's a very important thing. Anything else, Michelle?
No, that was a good description. Thanks.
Thanks. Moving on.
Okay, so the Rio San Jose and Rio Puerco basins, those are in New Mexico, and the Rio San Jose basin, you drive through. If you go to Albuquerque, you drive through it. It starts around the Theroux area and extends all the way almost to Tuajajale. Tuajajale is actually in the Rio Puerco basin. And when we started settlement discussions for the Rio San Jose basin, we saw that we had an opportunity to include water delivery, like to include, wanting to serve the Tuajajale community. And so we included part of the Rio Puerco basin. Now, I know the Rio Puerco basin extends northward. I'm actually from the Torreon chapter community, and so the Rio Puerco runs through that community as well. We're not settling that portion. It's actually just related to the Tuajajale community, where the Rio Puerco basin, it also is within the Rio Puerco basin. So, like I said, the Rio San Jose starts around the Theroux area, so and then extends all the way to Tuajajale. So in between, you have other communities that are not Navajo Nation, but these are the chapters that are within the Rio San Jose basin, and some of them are entirely within the San Jose basin, and some of them are just partially within the San Jose basin. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So in the Rio San Jose basin, our water management branch has data that more than 200 Navajo households do not have running water and rely on water hauling to meet their daily water needs. Existing groundwater supplies are limited and are of poor quality. There have been efforts to drill additional wells in some of the areas, some of the communities within the Rio San Jose, and the water quality in this area is very poor. And so, and also the drought conditions have impacted the water supplies that do exist. So that's something that we're taking into consideration as part of this settlement.
Moving on to the next slide.
So I did talk about there being other communities in the Rio San Jose basin. We also have the Pueblo of Acoma, the Pueblo of Laguna. The U.S. is also a party as a trustee for the Navajo Nation and also allottees. The state of New Mexico is also a party. Now, the city of Grants and the village of Milan, and also 9 individual acequias and community ditches. They are all parties to this settlement, to the Rio San Jose settlement. And I do want to point out that for the Pueblo of Acoma and the Pueblo of Laguna, this is their big water settlement. And they have actually already had their settlement as part of the Rio San Jose introduced in Congress. And we're working to become part of that settlement and to catch up to them to be part of the overall settlement that Congress authorizes and hopefully funds as well.
In the next couple of slides, we're going to start giving information about the other parties, just to give you an example. But what Michelle said was very important, and the concept that there are other tribes involved with this. And as I move to the next slide, again, this is very similar in terms of what the purpose is. And we've talked about this, that in terms of a settlement, it is finding out what are the needs of each tribe and for our nation. And again, I've mentioned this, it's not been on the slide this time, but we mentioned before, but one of the main reasons is for a permanent homeland. And what we want for moving forward in terms of that idea. Michelle, anything on this slide, or should we move on?
We can move on.
So again, there are some different uses in that, and again, there are a lot of uses, right? So in general categories, they're domestic, commercial, municipal, and industrial. We've talked about this in the last couple of weeks as well, and we're just pointing this out just to get you more familiar that water uses, and there are a lot of different water uses that we all must be aware of as we move forward with our water rights. And as I said, very soon we'll have slides that give us detailed information about the other parties that are in this settlement.
Yeah. So these next few slides are in the Acoma and Laguna's water rights settlement legislation. And so just highlighting parts of their settlement. We can move on.
Okay.
And then again, we have non-Indian parties, which is the Acequias, the Village of Milan, and the City of Grants. And they are a part of the settlement in order to meet their water rights needs. And however, I do want to point out that any non-Indian, the projects for the non-Indians outside of the tribal nations, the projects will be funded by the state of New Mexico, not federal funding.
Moving on.
Okay.
Just as Michelle mentioned, this is exactly what she was saying about the state funding. So this is just some information about that. But if Michelle has anything else to say, I'll let her do that.
Yeah. So the federal government, they do fund quite a bit for the tribal water settlements. And so they do look to the states to share in the costs for these settlements. And so New Mexico, as I said before, is expected to assist in making these settlements reality as well. And so these will be funded by the state of New Mexico. And I know a lot of our tribal members do live in these areas, so this should be good news to you as well. So go ahead and move forward.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Mac.
Okay.
No, go back. We have to talk about our proposal. I was going to let you do it. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. My mistake. So as we talked about, in terms of uses, like what are the uses of the water that we have? And so this slide gives you a few ideas about what we're doing in terms of what our past uses have been, because that's very important, and what the present uses of water what we want in this area. And so this is a list of that. And so I'll let Michelle add as she feels.
Well, first of all, I'm noticing that only part of the horse is pictured here. His head got cut off. But I did want to say that our water management branch works really closely with us, the attorneys from the Water Rights Unit. They gather all of this information for us and assist us with these settlements. And so they look at past and present water uses. They even get information data from NTUA in order for us to put forward what our claims are. So we can move on.
Okay. Oh.
And this is a map. It was actually provided by our water management branch. This is the type of technical work that they do. They identify stock ponds and impoundments. And if you can look real close, you can see where the Navajo Nation is affected. And this line, you'll see the basin that's in the kind of like a brown color. And then you'll see that on the top left, the chapters that are affected and where there are stock ponds and impoundments. And then you'll see Tuahajale, as I described earlier, is on the eastern side. And just a small portion of Tuahajale extends into the Rio San Jose. And then we also have also to the west, the Rama community. And our understanding is that in the Rama community, in the Rio San Jose, there aren't any homes in that area, but definitely probably ranches, and there's agricultural uses as well. And then you'll see, as I described earlier, north of I-40, maybe even extending a little south, there are some chapters like Baca Pruitt that are completely within the Rio San Jose Basin. Okay, next slide.
So what we're going to need to do is have the part 2 brought up, which will continue to talk about the Rio San Jose River, and then we'll keep on moving on to that as well.
Okay, so go ahead and go back to the map.
Okay.
The last map I showed was the stock ponds, and this one is I can't even read it. So this is another map depicting other types of this is the wells. This is the Navajo Nation well claims in the Rio San Jose Basin. Okay, go ahead, move on.
Next. Oh.
Okay, and I explained earlier that we do have an out-of-basin claim, so we did pull in the Rio Puerco Basin because we want this settlement to also address some of the needs in the Tuajale community. And so we did also have to gather for the areas of the Rio Puerco Basin that are going to be part of the settlement. We did have to gather past and present data as well.
So we're coming pretty close to the end of this particular settlement discussion and moving on to another one, just to let you know as well. But again, as I mentioned before, and it's nice to understand some of the technical terms. Again, groundwater. So here's the surface. The water that is underneath is considered to be groundwater, and the water on top is considered to be surface water. Other interesting notions here are the concept of not only when we're in our settlements, are we thinking about the past and the present, but the future needs? And again, I'll connect it with that phrase for a permanent homeland. And in regards to that, we talk about the amount of water, and that comes to quantity. And last week, there was a really good question about quantification that the Attorney General answered. And the quantification comes from this idea of quantity, of how much water we need for past, present, and future use. So
next slide.
Next slide.
So I don't want you to look at the numbers on the right because those haven't been updated. I had attempted to take them out of the presentation, but these are on the left. You'll see that these are what we are looking at to include in the settlement. We want to extend the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project to the western communities from the Rio San Jose, add chlorination stations, water hauling stations, help fund some of the IHS SDS projects. That's to provide water extensions to homes, and then also operation and maintenance, water line extensions and bathroom additions, livestock water related projects, and also to fund, as I mentioned several times, to address needs for the Tuajale community. This settlement would also provide funding that we need in order to ensure a permanent water source of clean drinking water for the Tuajale community. Next slide.
I'm just add one quick thing to this is the concept. You're going to hear me say the word settlement quite often, and it's because of the value of it. You've heard us also in the last couple of weeks mention wet water, and this is an example of wet water being funded primarily by the federal government. But if we go to litigation, it's a different process, and that's what we call paper water. So this is a really good example of that concept. Moving on.
Yeah, and since those amounts appear, I just want to reiterate that those amounts are may change. That those are just proposed costs, and I believe that they have increased. Go ahead.
And that's a very important point. Concept is difference between paper water and water and wet water. So moving on. So the next part we're going to be talking about is the Zuni River settlement.
Here is a map of the Zuni River and San Jose basins, and you'll see that in the Zuni River Basin, we have Rama, and they are almost completely within the Zuni River Basin. Nahatazil, Lupton has a small portion, Chichilta and Red Springs as well in the Zuni River Basin. Next slide.
Next slide.
And again, we always put this forward when we're negotiating our water rights settlements. The Navajo Nation and its members have lived on, hunted on, cultivated foods, and herded livestock on lands in the Zuni River Basin since time immemorial. The settlement will reflect time immemorial priority for the Navajo Nation's water rights. That's what we always assert to do.
And what I'm going to do right now is just hopefully take a little bit of time to look at that phrase, time immemorial, time immemorial. Because again, another concept that's been mentioned the last couple of weeks is on the state level that a lot of times state water rights are connected to what we call priority. I've already mentioned something that rhymes. If you don't use it, you lose it. But also the concept is, when did you start to use it? And that's your priority. When did you start to use that so that you can use it from then on forward? What's really important is that for us as a nation, in a concept like this, our understanding, as well as what we're presenting, is that it's time immemorial. That means it's always been understood. It's always been known that this water has been used by the nation, and so that priority, it affects the priority in a very important way for our nation. So again, might be a new phrase, a new idea for some of you, and just to help you understand some of the water right vocabulary. Moving on.
Okay, and I already described this, so we can go ahead and move on. Yep.
Yes.
Next one. Okay. Again, in the Zuni River Basin, a significant number of households do not have running water and rely on water hauling to meet daily water needs. Existing groundwater supplies are limited and are of poor quality. They have been tested to have arsenic qualities to it.
Next.
So for the Zuni River Basin, the adjudication for it began in 2001. The Navajo Nation, and in 2001, the U.S. Asserted the action on behalf of the Zuni tribe. The Navajo Nation did intervene because of our communities that lie within the Zuni River Basin. There are two proceedings within the adjudication to address Zuni and Navajo claims, and it was determined that the Zuni claims would be litigated before Navajo claims, and that's only if we weren't to get a settlement. So moving on. Again, since we are in settlement discussions, the adjudication has been stayed, and we do continue to report to the court on how our settlement efforts are doing. We report, I think, quarterly to the court so that they know that we're continuing to actively pursue settlement.
So again, just really quickly, a couple of vocabulary words that I see that might not be familiar to a lot of people is hydrologic, which also is hydrology. It's a technical term that talks about like water, the concept of when it deals with water. Like today, hopefully a lot of us are receiving rain or snow, and that's considered hydrology. That's currently happening. Last year, we can say we had a very good hydrologic year, which means we had a lot of water that came to our land in any form, rain or snow. But just that concept that you see right there where it says hydraulic or hydrology is the concept of water in the forms that it comes to the land that we have. So we'll move on from there.
Okay. So as part of this settlement, the Navajo Nation, the parties to the settlement, which includes the state of New Mexico, the U.S., the Zuni tribe, decided to use a model, and in order to develop and look at scenarios to see if projected water uses would cause harm to the parties, to each other. Like, for example, will the Zuni's use impact Navajo communities and vice versa? And so this model took time, a lot of technical experts, but it was something that was really important for the tribes, for all of the parties, to be able to see, how water use from each party would impact the other. And so this was very important to all of us in regards to coming together and making decisions for the settlement. Okay, again, in this settlement, we would be quantifying our water rights. We're including historic use, current use, future use, and we are also looking at projects that would serve the Navajo communities within the Zuni River Basin. Allottees, as we all know, there's many allotments within the around the Navajo Nation, and so it has been an issue that we've had to include in our discussions. And it's the United States that holds allotments and trusts for approximately 3,000 allottees in the Zuni River Basin. The United States, not the Navajo Nation, are the ones that represent the allottees in the adjudication and the settlement process. So again, the Navajo Nation is not representing the allottees in the settlement process or the adjudication. It is the United States. And the United States takes this role very seriously in our discussions. And so there's been a lot of discussions about how the allottee claims would be handled in these settlement discussions, in settlement.
Well, moving on then.
Go ahead, Mac.
So this slide is just showing us who are the parties. And again, the word settlement is very important here. We do have a tribe, the tribe in terms of involved in this, as well as we've talked about, the other sovereigns of the country, which is the federal government as the United States of America. And then the reason why that the federal government, just to make it as clear as possible, is they are the trustee. It's been a hard relationship for not only our nation and our tribe, but for other tribes as well. But this is how the system is playing out. And finally, then we have the state of New Mexico as the other sovereign as well. So moving on to the next slide.
Again, Zuni's proposal includes past and present water uses as well, irrigation uses, DCMI, domestic, commercial, municipal, industry, and their claims for future water uses.
So with Zuni having a proposal, that means the nation can have a proposal as well. Hopefully today, as we've gone over these settlements, you see that there is a process in which this works out. And that continues to be with, again, the needs of water infrastructure. And so I'll see if Michelle has anything to say about it before I go on.
I just wanted to say that like the other settlement we talked about earlier, the Zuni tribe has completed their settlement with the state of New Mexico, and they have legislation that's moving forward to be introduced in Congress. And we also are hoping to be a part of that, but it's all going to be dependent on whether these proposed settlements are approved by the Navajo Nation Council. We'll talk a little bit more about community education and some events that we have lined up as well to present these proposed settlements to the communities. Go ahead, Mac.
Okay.
Oh, actually, go back.
Yeah.
So we have been in discussions with the Rama Navajo Utility Authority and the Rama Navajo School Board, and in gathering what the water supply needs are, what the water line extension needs are, water and wastewater treatment, and operation and maintenance funding. So we are getting input from the various entities from the different communities as well. Okay, move forward. So this was based off of, like I said, conversations with the communities. There are needs, and these are some of them. The Rama Detention Center well, Unit 1 intertie, the RNUA water service unit vehicle, a need for construction of Unit 5 water well, equipment upgrades to other wells, and pump houses as well.
So I've mentioned it a couple times because we are going over several settlements today, but this is again an example of what can happen from a settlement, because what we would refer to as wet water. Okay, this is wet water, things that will happen, versus if you go through litigation. And my kids would probably say, "Dad, you sound like a broken record." Maybe I'm old now because a lot of you don't even know what records are anymore. So anyway, for those who do know what broken record means, I'm saying it over and over and over again. But the concept is if we go through litigation, we only get paper water versus what we have here for our settlement as wet water. So right. I'll move on to the next slide.
And what he means is paper water does not include funding for water infrastructure development. So our next steps again, we're in continued discussions, negotiations with the parties in the Zuni River Basin settlement, as well as the Rio San Jose / Rio Perco settlements. But we feel that we are getting close to reaching proposed settlements. And what we do is we're gathering all the data and including that in our discussions in our efforts to get these settlements done. So, and like Max said, it's really important to remember that what we're looking for, our goal is wet water, to be able to start providing, having communities realize, and realizing access to clean water. Yes. For many purposes and for our future. Okay, next slide.
And we're going to be moving on to the next part. As what we've talked about so far has been about the settlements in the various water basins, the water areas of the state of New Mexico. Now, what we're going to be talking about is the concept that there are times where we do have water rights, and there could be actions within the state, such as New Mexico, that the Water Rights Unit needs to address to help protect or to move forward the water rights of the Navajo Nation. Anything else?
Yeah. So for decades, the Navajo Nation has been pursuing its water rights. It was only more recently, within the past 2 decades, that we've realized, that we've realized actual water quantification of our water rights. And that's through the San Juan River Basin settlement in New Mexico, and then also the Navajo-Utah Water Rights Settlement Act. So our unit at DOJ is assigned, we have the responsibility of securing and protecting the Navajo Nation's water rights. So what happens once we secure our water rights is that we have to protect our water rights. And so already in the San Juan River Basin, we have intervened in cases protesting permit applications where we see that individuals are either trying to transfer their permits or change the use of their water use through these applications. And sometimes in our opinion, the water rights were abandoned. They hadn't been used for, years, maybe decades. And we feel that if we don't intervene and protest those applications, that our water rights will be affected. And a lot of that has to do with the hydrology that we're dealing with today, the climate change, and the mega drought that we're currently in. So our unit also is charged with, and we take it very seriously, to protect the water rights that we have. So next slide.
And then the next couple of slides will go over one of these examples that is being talked about right now.
So there's a case where the city of Farmington had acquired water rights from a water right holder, and Navajo Nation intervened with the position that those water rights had been long abandoned. The Navajo Nation did succeed in the administrative hearing, and the state engineer did agree that those water rights had been abandoned. Through New Mexico law, the city of Farmington did file an appeal, and that appeal is currently pending. The case is now going to New Mexico District Court, and we are it's the water rights unit's attorneys that are involved in that litigation. And it was a DOJ water rights attorney who represented the nation in the administrative hearing that we were successful in as well. So go ahead. Go ahead, Mac.
So the concept is we as the water rights unit are amazingly honored to try and educate and provide as much information to the nation and its members as possible. And we're doing our best with the leadership of the Attorney General to get this information out as much as we possibly can. One of the things you can do is continue to come back. You'll learn about water rights and other rights that are affecting our nation and the members. At the same time, please be aware that we have a Water Rights Commission for the Navajo Nation. They hold monthly meetings, and members are involved are welcome to and invited to come to those meetings. So if you are interested to attend those meetings, it would be wonderful to have you there. And so that information can be provided in terms of those links to those, because they're virtual and online. And then also at the same time, the Water Rights Commission's website. And again, very soon, starting in 2024, the beginning of 2024, with partnership with the Water Rights Commission, the Water Rights Unit will be going throughout the nation to give more information about settlements and about other issues that are happening, to inform the nation, because we know how important it is for all the members. I've been looking at some of the comments and some of the questions, and
before we go there, I just wanted to add that we will be going out to the Tuahajale chapter, the Rama chapter, and then we'll be in Crown Point as well to talk to the chapters that are within the Rio San Jose, probably in more detail, and we'll have the opportunity to answer questions in person. And I believe that those events will be in early January, starting January 8th. We're going to get information out via social media, and we'll be posting up posters in the different areas. So again, the meetings will be in Tuahajale, in Crown Point, and in Rama. And we're hoping to get the chapter houses, but the information will be forthcoming very soon. Go ahead.
So I've enjoyed being able to talk to you about this. And again, the questions, I read the questions, and as the Attorney General has mentioned, as the Water Rights Unit has done this for the entire month, that our goal is to collect these questions and be able to answer them, so that we can provide you the information that you want. And And so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen right now. And so
I see a comment that I really like. It's the last comment from Clarence Hogue. Hope I said your last name right. You said that this information needs to be shared with students so they understand and that this area piques their interest. And we completely agree with you. There are opportunities for internships with the Navajo Department of Justice, including our water rights unit. We actually have 2 student externs that are going to be starting here this next semester. But we are open. It is my goal as the Assistant Attorney General to get more young Navajos to become interested in our water rights. Because even after we secure our water rights, we still have that responsibility to protect our water rights from here forward. And that's the reason why I got into water rights as well, and I think the same probably goes for Mac, is a strong interest in our Navajo Nation water rights, and we only want to have that continue on. And I know one of the first earlier comments that caught my attention was from JoJo 3 Hairs, said, "Why is this just now being discussed? How long has the Navajo tribe been in talks with the federal and state governments about these water rights?" So, to be honest, they've been, our claims were filed. So, these settlements are part of adjudications that are currently pending. In the Rio San Jose, I believe that the claims were filed in the early 1980s, and in the Zuni River Basin, the claims were filed in the early 2000s. So the attorneys that were assigned, as well as our different government departments that have a responsibility towards water, have been involved in these types of discussions and collecting data and evidence and so forth since those filings, if not before. And luckily now we have, this ability to reach out to the communities through social media as well as in other ways. And we're still, trying to find ways to get the message out and to be able to educate our communities on what's going on. That's very important to me. I know it's very, very important to Mac and to the Attorney General as well, is to have that transparency and to be able to share information that we can share. Of course, when it comes to confidential information because of either we're in litigation or in settlement talks and other parties' information that we are bound by confidentiality. We can't share all information, but information that is public, we want to find a way to get that out to the communities, and that's what we're working on. Okay. Thank you, Denny Clark, for tuning in and your support. Priscilla Bitsui, question, might you explain checker border land on the Navajo Nation and how those that live on these sites will be effective to us? Well, I know that we did talk about allotments, and allotments are part of that checkerboard design around the Navajo Nation. There's also state land, federal land, and so forth that make up the checkerboard. Those areas, yes, they would. And those are all taken into consideration, not only the settlement, but if we were to continue to litigate, that's why the state of New Mexico and the U.S. are also parties to these cases. And that's why, like in the Rio San Jose, we have the non-Indian users in that area as part of the negotiation discussions as well. Did you want to add anything, Mac?
I just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to answer one of the many questions, which are all really great questions. This is from JoJo 3 Hairs, and the question is, why is this now just being discussed? How long has the Navajo tribe been in talks with the federal and state governments about these water rights? And
so you'll see that Mac wasn't paying attention because I answered that question But
Yeah.
go ahead, Mac. You probably have more to add to it.
I was just going to say that the concept is again, just to reiterate, then if Michelle has already answered it, they've been going on for decades. It's always been very important. But I would say that under the leadership of the Attorney General now, water is a top priority, and she knows the value of it. And I'd also say that that our leadership knows the value of it as well, and that's why that they know that the value is to let the membership and the nation realize what is happening. And I would say, from a personal perspective, is the importance of having this information so widely distributed as much as we possibly can. And that's a similar thing that Clarence Hogue mentioned, is with students. Before I became an attorney, my profession was a teacher. So for me, educating is in my heart, and that I want that too. I want all members, from our children to our elders and everyone in between, to know as much about water rights as possible, because of the value that it has for all of us, and the value that the leadership, including the Attorney General, has for water. So that was so this is a time that's very important, and grateful to be a part of this. So that's what I wanted to add, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, Jojo, for your question.
Yeah.
It was a good one. That's why it got answered twice. And by the way, I'm a fan. Okay. Any more questions? Or maybe the AG wants to come on and ask us any questions?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
You guys are doing such a great job of answering questions.
Oh, look, I'm wearing a hat.
Excellent. Let's see. Well, I did get a question through text message having to do with NIP. I don't have the text in front of me, but there was a question about completion of that project and how that interplays with our water rights settlement. I don't know if you guys have any insights on that.
I have a little. So NIP, it was decided, I think, in the early 2000s, the federal government stopped funding it fully. And that's always been a thorn in our side, that it was not completed as originally authorized. But the NIP project was included in the San Juan River Basin settlement. So there, I guess you would say that the U.S. government does see that their obligations were included as part of the settlement, because the NIP waters that are in use, or at the time were in use, were included in the settlement.
Okay, great. And then, did you guys, sorry, I had to step away momentarily. Did you give a timeline for what the horizon looks like for New Mexico?
Oh, actually, no, we didn't. Thanks for the reminder. So the plan is to wrap up these settlements with the other parties, and we feel that we're close to doing that. And again, once we wrap it up with the other parties, it's still a proposed settlement. The process is that the settlements have to go through the Navajo Nation Council process and be approved by the Navajo Nation Council. And then once approved, then we can move the proposed settlements forward to Congress. And ideally, we'd like to have them introduced in Congress while this Congress is still in session until the end of 2024, and during this current administration, because of their express support of tribal Indian water rights settlements. So we will, make our best effort to get the proposed settlements approved by the Navajo Nation Council, and then to Congress, hopefully by early spring. So we are working very hard, not only on these New Mexico settlements, but also the Navajo Gallup water supply Project Amendments Act that we described earlier, and then hopefully also a Arizona settlement as well. So we have a lot of work to do. And that's all thanks to our Attorney General, whose number one priority is water.
Yeah, well, and I actually wanted to give a shout out to this team. As Michelle has worked very hard to build this team, and Mac has been a pillar of strength of this team, and always bringing great ideas and great energy to the work. And I really appreciate being able to work with these two, and also Dwight Witherspoon, who's on the team. And so there's just it's incredible. I had worked on water under the Russell Begay administration. Our water team looked very different, and I'm so thankful to have the team that we have today, and folks who are from our community, who understand the challenges of access to water in our communities and the importance and significance of water rights at a personal level. So I'm just really pleased with our team and their skills. They have such a broad range of skills which is necessary to settle these deals, but also be litigating them at the same time in some instances, like with LCR. So I'm just so appreciative of the awesomeness of this team. And it's an honor to get to work with these guys so often, because water is my top priority. So thank you guys for the work that you do. And I do see another question from Clarence that looks really interesting that maybe you guys might want to turn to.
Okay, I'll read it. It says, for the farming community and farmers, there are lands that are not being used, and so the water is also not being used. And a large part of it due to the infrastructure, that infrastructure is deteriorating. So how is that going to be introduced? Because if a lot of our land is not being used for farming in water, and water is not being used, does that impact the amount of water that we can claim
As usable.
as usable? Go ahead, Mac.
So, the concept is, though, we've talked about different water uses, and so it depends on when we're getting our settlement or our quantification. It's always based on a number of factors, and this is another case that was called the Gila 5 case. And when tribes are getting their quantification or information organized. As we can expect, when we've talked about, the past is important, the past water use, the present water use, and the future water use. Now, the concept is even though it might not be used now, we can foresee it being used. Even though that the infrastructure might be deteriorating in a settlement, we can look to the fact that, we understand that, and we're in our settlements, we can request and identify areas that need to be, funded for a settlement. So the concept is, yes, irrigation, very important for many reasons, for our own livelihood, but for economic benefit as well. So we have mechanisms in which we can address these sort of things and work toward getting the water that the nation needs in order to be involved in the uses that they want, such as agriculture, and depending upon factors that I've mentioned already, like the uses of the past, the present, and the future, and working with our technical team, and who are fantastic. The Attorney General and Michelle have mentioned how wonderful we are in terms of the quality and the number of people who can work. And I want to also recognize our technical team as well. The water branch management branch are amazingly skilled, and they care so much about the nation, and their work is, I get to see their behind the scene work, and I'm grateful for them, and I admire them, and they work really well with us to do exactly what Clarence Hogue wants to know about moving forward, to get these things for the nation, for which I like to say, our permanent homeland, because that's what the courts have told us what we have access to, and that's what we're looking for in our treaties as well.
Great
I hope that was a good answer.
Great question, Clarence, and great answer, Mac. Thank you.
And I just want to add that, all of that use is very, very important to an adjudication, especially. But what happens in an adjudication is that you have experts who are opining as to what the water use levels are, both as a historic matter as well as a projected future matter. And some of that ties into projections of the future population, and it's based on an existing growth rate and sort of the retention and growth of the population on the land, the reservation lands. But in a settlement context, we can just kind of all agree, the parties to the settlement, there's a little more flexibility, and we're not tied to essentially having a battle of the experts, and perhaps I think there's more deference and flexibility to negotiate for larger population projections, because we're not, again, a settlement is really, it's expansive, whereas an adjudication is more reductive. You have to establish, there's a presumption starting from zero, essentially, and you have to establish everything affirmatively, and the other parties are constantly undermining your assertions and trying to minimize your claim. Whereas in a settlement, everyone's just sort of thinking together, what is our future collective population going to be? What are our future collective needs going to be? What are our current existing historic and present uses? And I think it's just allows everybody to have a larger pie when it comes to water rights. Whereas with the adjudication, again, you're starting from zero and having to establish things affirmatively, and you're fighting the other parties for every little piece that you're establishing. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. But once you have that settlement, then the uses, there's no longer that imperative to continue those particular types of uses. So if we've established a certain amount of use rights in a settlement for irrigation or whatever purposes, then we're not required to use at that level. We're no longer in a use it or lose it type of environment. Whereas, with unsettled rights, it kind of is that type of situation. So, but thank you for the question. And we do have a question about Navajo language. And in some of our other presentations, we have had a Navajo language presentation. So we will certainly take that feedback into consideration and see if there's something we can do to accommodate that request. So thank you. Do we have other questions that we want to field at this time, team? Or I know technically my team allegedly has the day off, but we've all been working since on calls all morning. So
what we do?
Okay, well, if there's nothing further, any closing remarks that you would like to leave our listeners with, Michelle and Mac?
Thank you for viewing and tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, as well as I hope you can come out to some of our events that we'll be advertising. And thank you, AG and Mac, for all that you do to help move us forward. And Yat E Keshmesh, everyone.
What I like to say is I do appreciate this, because interacting with members of the nation helps me understand and gives me the gratitude that I have for the job that I have. I'm grateful that I can work for the nation, and I hope, Darren, I hope I can speak more Navajo in the future. That would be wonderful. And so I understand the value of keeping our language and keeping our water, and on that note. But it's wonderful to interact with you as members of this nation. Yeah.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you, team. And then we have Kevin as well. I want to thank Kevin in the background, making sure that everything is running as smoothly as we're able to, as we allow him to. And also just want to wish everyone happy solstice, happy holidays, and hopefully enjoy the return to light as we go into this new year. And I hope you enjoy time with your family, and hopefully many of you are coming back to the nation to visit our homeland, and we are working hard in the Nigerian administration to make it possible for you to return to our homeland permanently, so that we can all make great use of these water rights that we're establishing, and the actual projects that are running water to communities. So, yeah, everyone, have a beautiful rest of your day.